Hey guys, sorry for this one coming in a bit late. I had a bad computer crash and forgot to save my data like a chump, so I kind of lost my initial version of this video. So I just redid it from scratch all of a sudden. As a result, this one might be a little bit more soft and loose than normal because I'm running it all off from my memory. So this episode starts immediately where the other episode ended, with the Gulf War Army and the Getter team being completely ambushed by a massive army of insectors. A kind of lackluster battle breaks out where the ARC team is totally OP and crushes through the bugs easily. Meanwhile, Musashi's Gulf War Army pops up these interesting Getter race shields, and so they handle the situation pretty well themselves. Now, Gettersaurus shows up on the planet alive and well, but he's been wrecked from the time travel, and he ends up needing to be bailed out pretty hard by the ARC team. Gettersaurus then gets tentacle raped by this giant sea anemone-like thing, but the ARC team tells them to retreat, and it doesn't work. They get caught again, so the ARC team just finally gives up and saves their ass. Then we finally get to Musashi, and the massive plot dump ensues that we've been waiting for. Now, Musashi notices that Takuma brought him his helmet, and instantly morphs into the classic Musashi costume. So the Musashi we meet at first just seems like a really in-shape, cool version of Musashi, but then he drops all these serious info bombs and gets steadily crazier. And to start off with, the Getter Emperor shows up, closing the long-awaited mystery of 20 years. Now, Musashi takes all the pilots inside the Getter Emperor, which is run by these creepy guys dressed in bad Getter Robo cosplay. He reveals that in the future there was a massive galactic space war between human space colonists and various different alien species, where events played out pretty similar to Gundam and everyone had their own Zakus, but nonetheless the Earth was losing hard until suddenly the Getter Emperor showed up. He reveals that they are in the future, they are on an alien planet, and that the Getter Emperor is a massively evolved Getter Robo that has grown to be the size of a planet. And it pretty much creates its own pocket universe, and it traverses the galaxy, genociding and terraforming planets in the name of a vaguely evil human empire. Now, as a result, the Andromeda conflagration was actually justified in attacking the Earth and trying to destroy the Getter Robo, because the Getter Emperor was going around trying to genocide them. So even though they started terminating up the past to try and upgrade the Getter Emperor, which apparently inadvertently directly caused the events of Getter Robo G and everything going on in the present, they were still doing it in self-defense, so it puts this whole picture into like a very, very gray state of morality. Making things even more gray, Musashi at this point then gets really jazzed about the concept of human supremacy, and he executes a bunch of insect prisoners who are dressed in bad POW costumes. So Musashi's human supremacy spiel is also very, very morally gray when they present it. Now, it doesn't sound completely terrible because we are humans, but Kamui and the other Source pilots are there, and they're not humans, so they get super offended by it. They pretty much call it out as straight up fascism, and Takuma takes it all in, but he's like not really giving a shit about the whole situation. He then realizes that with the Getter Emperor cornering the Andromeda conflagration, this is probably his best chance to kill McDonald and avenge his mom. So yeah, he gets super jazzed and angry about that, and the episode ends with them rushing out to kill the Andromeda conflagration. By the way, I somehow skipped this over, but at some point while the Getter Emperor was out genociding planets, Musashi gets killed by like a stray bullet, but then instantly regenerates via a totally happy clone of himself, revealing that he's not actually the original Musashi who died heroically, but an artificial human created by the Getter Emperor to kind of carry out the will of the Getter Emperor, and he just so happens to look like Musashi. Now the episode ends with this end song turning into heats, and a lot of cool new manga footage of Shin Getter and Getter Robo Go the manga. Alright, so this was a complicated episode. If I'm being real with you guys, I wasn't feeling the battle at the start of the episode. It was just more trash enemies, and aside from that big bug and that sea anemone looking thing, it was a really disappointing battle, and I was very disappointed in Gettersaurus again. Gettersaurus cannot get a break. It's officially worked for like 20 seconds out of its 2 minutes of screen time, but at least I do feel like the pilots contributed to the story more than any other episode this time. And then being there on the Getter Emperor made the impact of Musashi's whole spiel seem way more impactful. I was initially very happy to see Musashi come back because he's a comfortable classic character, but his presence ends up ending on a pretty bizarre note because he's not the original Musashi. The original Musashi was a fat, heroic slob. This guy's more in shape and he's straight up a clone of Musashi, but he's completely replaceable in a weird way that makes him feel like a cross between Rei Ayanami and Kenny from South Park. And the overall vibe I got from him is that he's less Musashi and more just like an avatar of the Getter Emperor who is flavored like Musashi. And at this point, I kind of have to like comprehend that the Getter Emperor is perhaps some kind of self-aware monster. Now, I've always been hella curious about the Getter Emperor since it always appeared pretty fantastically at the end of every Getter series in the past 2 decades. And it's been hinted at since the last episode of Shin Getter Robo that in every series where it's been presented as more or less a glorious Getter Valhalla, but in this episode it comes off more or less a super over-evolved Getter Robo who's like just going around on his own accord, committing genocide, and I guess he's trying to protect humanity, which gives me like these vague Gunbuster 2 vibes. On top of that, Musashi calls the Getter Emperor God, but I'm really curious about how he meant that and like the phrasing. Did he mean it like literally that he's worshipping it as his god? Or did he mean it in like a super literal sense that it is a god and it's alive and it was always out there? I mean, it might just be self-aware and self-sufficient, but at the end of the day, I think it's just a super evolved Getter Robo and not really any kind of like god like the Ideon or whatever. Now, I was super happy we finally got to see the Emperor's transformation sequence because I've never seen that animated before, and that was a really cool part of the episode. But otherwise, Musashi's whole human supremacy kind of bad guy speech, that was a real mind blower because it was really the best thing about this episode because it was so philosophical and weird, and they really phrased it out in such a way that it had this really strange gray morality. It did not sound terrible until Kamui and the other dinosauroids just pointed out that they're not humans, so it's fuck to them because it's fascism. So it's really a mind-blowing concept because I'm like totally, if I'm being honest, I'm like, go humans, go human race. I really hope the human race does well. And straight up, if there was a battle between humans who were being aggressive and an evil army of insects who could easily kill humans, I would completely be behind the humans. But this episode does kind of paint it as fascism. And on top of that, the Getter Emperor's whole prerogative for genociding planets makes it feel like a Death Star. So, I don't know, it's a real head scratcher. Like, I don't want to be for human supremacy, but at the same time, laid out as a straight fact, human supremacy isn't that bad in reality because there are no other sentient races. Anyway, so on top of that Musashi being a clone thing, they really play it up for cheap laughs in this episode, but I also have to digest the existential horror of that the Getter Robos are either absorbing straight up their pilots' bodies, and then I guess recording their brains, and then I guess furthermore recreating them. And I'm also really confused about these guys in the bad Getter Robo cosplays. I guess they're also some sort of artificial humans, but they look so goofy. But I guess that's all they gotta be. I mean, I'm a little bit let down, honestly, because every previous series has really romanticized the Getter Emperor as like this great ultimate being. And here it's just kind of soured because it's just like a monstrous giant robot full of shitty clones genociding aliens. So yeah, that's a different perspective on the whole thing. Okay, so quick points on this episode. I'm not giving any points for that opening battle because that let me down and just wasted time in my opinion. I will give 1 point for the Gettersaurus rejoining the plot, being the voice of reason in the face of Musashi's human supremacy, and probably having the biggest like plot contribution it's ever had. 1 for Musashi getting his classic costume back and the member berries that brought up. 1 for Getter Emperor finally being called out by name. 1 for Getter Emperor's super cool, super complicated transformation sequence. 1 for the massive plot dump of what the fuck is going on because I feel like they really got away from that at some point. one for the massive plot twist that the Andromeda army might be actually justified and that they are literally fighting in self-defense, one for their time travel nonsense that apparently set up the entire Getter Robo G franchise, and one for that plot twist that Musashi is a clone and the Getter Emperor is run by dudes in Getter Robo cosplay. Oh, and one more for the mindfuckery of just the concept of human supremacy and the numerous morale questions that thinking about that brings up. Oh, and the end credits turned into heats, which is also worth an acknowledgement. So that brings this episode up to a massive and unprecedented 10 points, which I'm okay with because, again, this episode gave so much backstory for literally every previous Getter series that it was worth it. Now, at this point, we have 3 episodes left. If I had to take my guesses for how they're going to close it up at this point, they need to wipe out the Andromeda Generals, and that's what they're heading into in the next episode. They also need to deal with the Andromeda Queen, who did show up in this episode, reminding us she exists, and they still haven't met her in person, so perhaps they'll get around to her soon. And then after that, unless a bigger threat shows up, there might be some hostility between Kamui and the other Dinosauroids because of the whole situation with the Getter Emperor and Musashi's gray morality. Possibly they might even turn on the Getter Emperor because they did seem like they were very offended by it. So, I mean, I could see the Sauruses try to turn on the Emperor and try to fight it. But then again, the Saurus was just so humiliated in this episode, it couldn't even beat basic Insectors. So, I don't know, these guys can barely hold their own in the fight. What are they going to do against an inter-universal threat? So, really, really a lot of crazy shit went down this episode, and it's a lot to think about. I'm your Buster Green. Check back again next week because we only have 3 episodes and things are going to get really, really nuts. Thank you. Subscribe. I only need 350 subscribers. Whoa!